Joining us this evening to talk about all things diet and nutrition is Richelle Flanagan. Like I mentioned, Richelle is joining us from Ireland. Richelle is a registered dietitian and nutritionist and the former president of the Irish Nutrition and Dietetic Institute. Richelle has over 2 decades of experience in healthcare and business. Richelle herself was diagnosed with young-onset Parkinson's and speaks regularly on the role of nutrition in Parkinson's care. Richelle has co-authored 6 peer-reviewed publications on diet and Parkinson's and is also the co-founder of My Moves Matter, Nutrition PD, and the Women's Parkinson's Project. This evening, Richelle's going to chat to us about the role of diet and nutrition in Parkinson's care. So thanks, Richelle, and thank you so much for being with us tonight. Over to you.
Well, thanks very much for the introduction, and thanks everyone for staying up. I don't know what time it is there. It's 9 o'clock in the morning here. It's Parkinson's Awareness Month, so it's nice to be here to share that with you. But hopefully in years to come, we won't have a Parkinson's Awareness Month because we'll have solved the problem. But anyway, I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay. Is that okay? You can see it all? Okay, so basically I'm here to talk to you about why diet matters for us folk living with Parkinson's disease. So I'm going to basically cover these areas. I sort of focused on the kind of key areas that I feel are important. Stacey asked me to try and stay in around 25 minutes. I might be a little bit over that, so bear with me. But basically going to look at the microbiome, Mediterranean diet pattern, managing fluctuations, vitamins, particular vitamins, looking at checking them about weight, a checklist for you at the end, and how to access dietary support. So the first thing I'm going to focus on is the microbiome. So some of you might have heard the term the gut-brain axis, which is basically the link between the gut and the brain. And it's the nerves, connecting the nerves between your digestive system and the brain. And the digestive system is often known as the second brain because it's actually the second largest collection of nerves outside of your brain. And believe it or not, but your nerves in your gut produce about half of your body's dopamine. People think that it's just produced by the brain, but it's also produced by the gut as well. And Parkinson's can affect the gut's nervous system, causes changes in the lining of the gut, and can affect the gut microbiome. And this is potentially why many people with Parkinson's have gut-related issues. So what is the microbiome? It's basically trillions of tiny organisms, bacteria, fungi, viruses, and other microorganisms that populate our gut, which starts in our mouth, goes right down to our anus, and basically, has a lot of functions in our body. So it helps us to produce vitamins such as vitamin B and K. It plays an important role in our immune system. It helps us to digest food, particularly fibre that isn't easily broken down in the stomach or the small intestine, helps us to combat harmful microorganisms and creates a barrier effect in the intestines to protect toxins from getting out into the rest of our body. And a healthy and balanced gut microbiota basically helps to support good, proper digestive functioning. So a healthy gut depends on, as I say, a balance and diversity of bacteria. And also, as I mentioned in the previous slide, it helps us to break down fibre through fermentation and produces things called short-chain fatty acids. And these short-chain fatty acids are really important to actually strengthen the lining of our gut, reduce inflammation, help brain and muscle energy, may lower cholesterol, and help blood sugar control as well. But when these bacteria are out of kilter, so you've got sort of healthy bacteria and less healthy bacteria, but when you've got more unhealthy bacteria, this is called dysbiosis. It's basically where the natural balance is knocked out of kilter. So what happens in Parkinson's? Basically, we have fewer healthy bacteria, and the more unhelpful bacteria reduces the amount of short-chain fatty acids and reduces the ability to produce vitamins. It creates more gut inflammation and impacts our bowel functioning and our brain signaling from the gut to the brain. So why does this matter? Obviously, because the gut and brain are closely connected, and supporting gut health may help our symptoms. And there may be answers in terms of slowing progression in this whole gut-brain highway. So this brings me on to the Mediterranean diet pattern, because many people ask, what's the best diet for Parkinson's? And at the moment, there's no specific diet that has been advised for Parkinson's. But if I was a betting woman at the moment, the evidence is showing that the Mediterranean pattern of eating is probably the most beneficial for people with Parkinson's. And one of the main reasons for this is because it's actually got a lot of fiber in the diet. So what is the Mediterranean diet pattern? It basically is a way of eating that's minimally processed. So it's natural foods, cooked naturally. It's not lots of packaged foods with lots of, additives and ingredients. It's high in fiber. It contains a lot of health protecting foods. It is a pattern of eating. So the benefit comes from actually the combined amount of foods, eating them all together. They also work in synergy to provide the benefit to us. And there are specific food benefits from certain foods within that package. And they also contain a lot of beneficial micronutrients, so vitamins and minerals, and phytonutrients, phyto being plants, so basically specific nutrients from plants. So on the right-hand side here, it shows the kind of main constituents of the Mediterranean diet pattern. So olive oil, whole grains, fruits, in particular berries, vegetables, in particular green leafy vegetables, pulses and nuts, fish, white and oily fish, lean poultry, keeping red meat to a small amount, so maybe 2 servings a week. So that would be about a total of 8 to 9 ounces cooked in the week. Moderate dairy intake, limiting treat foods, and limiting takeaway or fried foods and ultra-processed foods. So in general, the Mediterranean diet is very beneficial for health. It helps to reduce the risk of all different types of brain diseases, improves eye health, reduce the risk of asthma and allergy, improves blood glucose levels, and reduces risk of obesity, reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease, improves immunity, helps to improve the gastrointestinal health and the gut microbiome, and reduces the risk of certain cancers. And there was research done in 2025 that showed that people who followed a Mediterranean diet pattern, who were assessed using a Mediterranean dietary scoring system, showed that for every 2-point increase in this MEDI score, predicted they would live longer and reduce their risk of cognitive disorders. And a colleague of mine, a dietitian colleague in the States, who used to work under Michael Oken, who's a world-renowned movement disorder specialist who's written the Parkinson's plan. She did research in people with Parkinson's in terms of following a Mediterranean diet, and it showed that the average MEDI score in people with Parkinson's rose from 4.4 to 11.9 in just 5 weeks. So it shows that, the Mediterranean diet can have quite an impact on your Mediterranean score. And looking at that result of the previous study, showing that every 2-point increase means that you live longer and reduce your risk of cognitive disorders, indicates that following a Mediterranean diet pattern can actually be quite immediate in terms of its impact. So in terms of the Mediterranean diet and the microbiome, just showing you here, on the left-hand side is the Western diet, and it basically leads to this microbiome dysbiosis I mentioned. It also creates a lot of this unhealthy bacteria, which creates unhealthy metabolites, as they say here, these LPS secreting bacteria.
Oh, sorry, Richelle.
It's okay.
Thank you.
The Western diet is associated with the increased risk of developing Parkinson's. But on the other hand, the Mediterranean diet helps, have a healthy microbiome. It helps the secretion of BDNF, which we know is something that is very important for benefit to Parkinson's, people with Parkinson's, and helps with synaptic nerve plasticity, and also helps to produce this short chain fatty acid bacteria. helps to increase the short chain fatty acids, which helps to decrease the risk of Parkinson's development. So the Mediterranean diet, actually packs a very large punch in terms of gut health as well. Sorry, slide. So in terms of research specifically of the Mediterranean diet pattern for Parkinson's, there have been some trials in about 80 plus people with Parkinson's, which showed that the diet followed for about a 10-week period led to a reduction in non-motor symptoms such as constipation and indigestion, in particular gastro symptoms, improved executive functioning. So that's things like concentration, multitasking, reducing brain fog, etc. It improved language skills and improved cognitive function. It also led to the increase in antioxidants, which basically help to dampen down inflammation. And we know with Parkinson's, inflammation is part of the picture. And it also helped to increase the short chain fatty acids that I've been mentioning. So also there was a paper actually done by a nutrition researcher in Australia in 2023 looking at different diets. And the summary was that a healthy diet with higher intakes of fruit, veg, fish, and healthy fats was associated with a lower incidence of Parkinson's, milder symptom severity, and slower disease progression. So basically looking to have a plant-forward diet doesn't mean you have to cut out meat, but it just means that to have more plant foods in your diet. So on that, you'll see there is if you want to scan it, I think the link is still working. But you can scan and you can actually test out your own Mediterranean diet score. So you'll have a chance that's been recorded to do that at a later stage. So in terms of the other part of the Mediterranean diet is with regard to what we call the top shelf or discretionary foods. So the Mediterranean diet is about reducing those foods in the diet. And that is because ultra-processed foods that are high in fat, sugar, and salt may worsen symptoms of Parkinson's, disrupt sleep, and increase diabetes risk. And diabetes, uncontrolled blood sugars actually lead to worse Parkinson's symptom management. And basically, these ultra-processed foods displace healthier food options. They reduce antioxidants, which I mentioned help to reduce inflammation, and expose the body to harmful substances like trans fats and additives and emulsifiers, things that we are beginning to see research showing that have negative impacts on the gut lining that I mentioned earlier on. So the Mediterranean diet recommends limiting treat foods to 5 servings a week, deep fried meats to no more than 3 a month, and takeaway fried foods ideally eaten 1 month or less. In terms of sugar, consuming a diet high in added sugars can increase inflammation in the body and the oxidative stress. So both of which are linked to the development and progression of Parkinson's. Some studies suggest that women may be at a greater risk due to our hormonal differences in how sugar is processed in our bodies. High blood sugar can also lead to gastroparesis, which is basically slow stomach emptying, which many people with Parkinson's have because the nerves are affected by Parkinson's in the gut, which means the movement of your whole system is slower. So that can impact your digestive system and also how well your medications are absorbed. So Mediterranean style diet helps to support better blood sugar control due to the focus on the healthy foods such as whole grains, legumes, vegetables, and healthy fats. So I took a bit of information with regard to the Australian diet to put it into context. So this is from the Australian government showing, what the patterns were in terms of eating in Australians. So 9 in 10 adults do not eat enough vegetables. 4 out of 5 19 to 50-year-olds do not eat enough fruit. 36% of total calories comes from discretionary these top shelf foods and takeaways, etc. Alcohol is over 22% of discretionary food intake. 80% of people are not eating enough dairy. 76% of women and men are not eating the recommended servings of whole grains. 87% of women and 80% of men did not meet the recommended servings of meat and alternatives. Fats, trans fats, which are very unhealthy fats for us, were high. And salt was between 1.9 and 3.4 times more than the adequate amount that we recommend. So that's the general population profile of dietary intake. And in terms of sugar, this shows you here the average intake of sugar. So in terms of between 31 and 50, 15 teaspoons a day, 51 and 70 years old, 11 teaspoons a day, and people who are 71 and over, 11 teaspoons a day. The recommended amount from the point of view of heart health is 6 teaspoons a day for women and 9 teaspoons a day for men maximum. So you can see that the Australian population is eating a lot more than that on a daily basis. Also, in terms of the top shelf foods, 36% of total energy intake comes from these discretionary foods, and people eat 5 to 7 servings per day on average. And you might have heard me say that the Mediterranean diet advises no more than 5 servings per week. So the average Australian is eating that per day. And the top contributors are cereal-based products such as muffins, pastries, savoury biscuits, cakes, confectionery, and snack foods such as potato snacks and corn snacks. This also showed in terms of how many of the 5 food groups were Australians actually meeting in terms of the recommended servings. And you'll see here with all the X's that men basically didn't meet any of the recommended serving amounts, and women, the only thing that they met was the grains and the over 70s. So in terms of a food scoring at the moment, the Australians are not doing well in terms of meeting their recommended servings. So I think the reason I put this in was to put into context how important it is. You know, people often talk about, should I take follow the ketogenic diet, should I do intermittent fasting? But actually, fundamentally, we need to really look at our basic diet and improve that. And there's huge potential to be gained. And just I saw this clipping here from 2023 that Aussie women confirmed benefits of the Mediterranean diet, and a study showed that it was great for the health. And it basically said that research showed that the Mediterranean style diet also helps to reduce depression. And we know in Parkinson's that anxiety and depression are 2 core symptoms of Parkinson's, and also just having Parkinson's can create a sense of feeling depressed. And there's actually a huge research centre in Australia called the Food and Mood Centre, which does huge research into the benefit of diet on mental health, and showing very strong impact in terms of Mediterranean diet for reducing massive major depressive disorder, and actually has in some cases actually been better than medication for improving major depressive disorder. So lots of beneficial health, mental health benefits too. So I talked about fibre and the importance to the gut. One of the key areas in terms of Parkinson's that affect people, up to 80% of people can have constipation. They can have it up for 20 years before they're diagnosed with Parkinson's. It can continue on after the diagnosis, and some people, if they haven't had constipation, might develop it. So the thing about constipation is that it allows the buildup of the unhealthy bacteria that I mentioned. And this unhealthy bacteria does all the things that I mentioned earlier on, which is, in terms of creating a less healthy microbiome, creating a leaker gut, and might have an impact on the progression of the condition. The other thing that it does is it slows the absorption of your levodopa into your brain. So people who are constipated tend to not have as much effect of their levodopa medication on controlling their symptoms. So in terms of constipation, one of the key areas is people are not taking enough fibre. So people need to be aiming to take between 25 and 30 grams of fibre a day. And this fibre comes from 2 sources: soluble fibre, which comes from your fruit and vegetables, but also from things like your oats and things like your legumes, chickpeas, pulses, kidney beans, etc. So these kind of create a kind of a gel consistency for your poo to make it easier to pass. And then you've got the insoluble fibre, which is the roughage. It's kind of nature's natural broomstick, I call it. So it helps to sort of sweep out the bowel and sort of push it out. So the combination of both types of fibre help you to pass a poo more easily. And there's very many different ranges of grains that you can choose from: buckwheat, barley, millet, to make your diet more interesting from a whole grain point of perspective. So many people ask with regard to, as it's just a caveat before I move on, is fluid is really important. So if you take all this fibre into your diet and don't take fluid, you'll end up bunging yourself up more. So you need fluid to help, again, the poo to move through. And if you're going to increase fibre in your diet, you need to do it slowly. So if you don't have much fibre in your diet to start with and you want to increase it, do it over a number of weeks, because the bowel needs time to adjust to you adding more fiber into it. And if you do it too suddenly, too quickly, you could actually make your constipation worse. Exercise is also very important for moving the bowel as well. So many people ask about probiotics. And in terms of probiotics, there is some research to show that it can help constipation. So at the moment, there's not enough research to actually, for someone to prescribe a probiotic for a person with Parkinson's. But there is some evidence to show there's two particular probiotic drinks, one called Simprove and the other called Yakult, which have shown benefit in terms of helping to improve stool consistency and the number of stools that people pass. So that helps to reduce constipation. So if you wish to trial a probiotic, choose one that has research in Parkinson's. Trial it for 3 months because that's the time you kind of need to see if it actually has an impact. Track your bowel movements and any other symptoms to see, does it improve things? Does it make things worse? If it makes worse, stop it. If it improves things, you can continue, but make sure you let your neurologist and your Parkinson's nurse know you're on a probiotic because it does have an impact on your Parkinson's in terms of your medication sometimes as well. So the other thing I just wanted to mention about constipation is there's often many people say, I'm doing all the right things, I'm taking lots of fiber and I'm walking and I'm drinking lots of water and I'm doing all the right things and I'm still constipated. I don't know what's going on. And it was actually when I was researching this area for an online gut program that we've developed, I was kind of delving into the research and also from listening to, in particular, a number of women who shared with me, and actually young onset women, who shared with me that they were manually evacuating their bowels. I thought, okay, that's not right. People shouldn't be having to manually evacuate their bowels. What's going on there? So actually, I delved into it more. There's a thing called dysenergic defecation. So this is where there's a problem coordinating the pelvic floor muscles and nerve, and also there's an issue with the nerve coordination between the brain and the bowel. And what that does is because those nerves aren't working properly, people have the symptoms of excessive straining, a sense of incomplete evacuation. They haven't completely passed a poo, hard, or they can have normal poos. Poo less than 3 times a week, have to use fingers to pass a poo, sit in the toilet for a long time trying to get the poo out, going to the toilet 7 times a day because they have that sensation that they haven't actually fully passed a poo. So what happens is you see in this little image on the right is the poo. So you might be doing all the right things, eating all the right fiber, taking your fluid, but actually what it does is it gets to the door and the elevator is not working to get it out. So you've done all the right things, but you can't get it out the elevator door. And that's because the nerves are not coordinating properly. So it's very important to get a diagnosis for this. If you're someone who is experiencing these symptoms, go to see a physiotherapist who has experience in pelvic floor and defecatory dysfunction. And they can help you actually get that poo out. And there is certain sort of, sorry, I'm trying to think of the electrical stimulation tools they can use to help stimulate the bowel to help you have a more satisfactory poo. And, as dietitians, we talk about poo all the time, and a lot of people are embarrassed about talking, but it's actually one of the most, uncomfortable feelings when you're constipated, and it literally affects how you feel in your brain. Like it's like a load on your head when you have a load in your bowel, and toxins can build up in the body because of this constipation. Because the whole idea of passing a poo is to eliminate toxins out of the body. So the next thing I'm going to focus on is managing fluctuations in Parkinson's. So basically, in terms of most people with Parkinson's start on levodopa. So I just want to say before I get on to the levodopa, when you're newly diagnosed with Parkinson's, you don't have to start medication. Generally speaking, the medication doesn't help to slow progression, but it helps to manage your symptoms. So levodopa is an external source of dopamine to replace the dopamine that we've lost because we've lost neurons that produce dopamine. So the only reason to start levodopa is if your function is affected and it affects your day-to-day quality of life. So if you're working, you can't type or write, or if you need, you're tired or so it's your function. Even if you're not working, if you're volunteering, and you're finding that, your walk is affected or you're more stiff. So this is where the levodopa comes in. It helps to replace that dopamine in your brain so that you can move and function better. So it's a bit like someone with type 1 diabetes, they don't have enough insulin. They replace insulin. So same with us, we don't have enough dopamine, we replace the dopamine. So most people will eventually end up on levodopa. And the evidence would show that it doesn't make no difference whether you delay the start or start it early. but actually it has the same outcomes. So in terms of levodopa, one of the main things is, it's about optimizing that levodopa to work as best as it can to help us manage our symptoms as best as we can. So when you take your levodopa, you have to swallow it. It has to go down the esophagus, into the stomach, and into the small intestine, where it basically crosses over into the bloodstream, goes up to your brain, and crosses over your blood-brain barrier into your brain. So the levodopa has a thing called carbidopa with it, and that's what helps the body to not break down levodopa in the body, but to get to the brain and then cross over. So the issue is then when you eat foods, particular foods that can interfere with this, and this is protein foods in particular. You eat your protein foods, chicken, meat, fish, dairy, pulses, all those kind of protein-rich foods. You eat them, they go through the same digestive process into the stomach, and they get broken down into amino acids. They cross into the bloodstream, they travel to the brain, and they cross over at the blood-brain barrier. The issue is they cross the exact same point as levodopa. So they compete with levodopa for crossing over into your brain. This means if you take your levodopa too close to a high protein meal, it may reduce the efficacy of that levodopa, the amount of levodopa that gets into your brain, which means then that your symptoms won't be as well controlled because you didn't get the whole dose. So in terms of Parkinson, your levodopa, people might be familiar with the terms, fluctuations or on off. And this is basically, it's a bit like, when you take medication for diabetes, in terms of blood sugars go up and down. So it's the same with your dopamine levels. They go up and down in relation to your levodopa doses. So when you take your medication, it takes about half an hour for it to kick in, half an hour to 3/4 an hour to get to your brain for you to start feeling that, your bradykinesia, your slow, stiff movements are improving, your tremors improving, whatever it might be, your brain fog is lifting, etc. So that lasts generally for about 3 to 4 hours. And then it basically starts to wear off. So you basically run out of that levodopa tablet. So that's what you call coming into an off. So it basically means your symptoms are reappearing. They're not as well controlled. So you take your next levodopa, gets to your brain, and you're on. So basically it means your symptoms are well controlled. You can do what you want to do. So the idea about, levodopa is to try and keep those fluctuations from getting too high and too low. So trying to have them as even as possible. So consistent level of levodopa throughout the day. And this is one of the problems in Parkinson's. We have no biomarker to actually, so with, say, diabetes, you can test a thing called your blood sugars, or you can test HbA1c to see what your control is like. We don't have anything to actually identify what our dopamine levels are like, except for our fluctuations give us an indication. So in terms of helping to smooth those fluctuations out, timing your medication around your food is important. So to avoid this interaction between amino acids interfering with your levodopa absorption into your brain, it's advised to take your levodopa medication 30 minutes before you eat a meal high in protein, or 60 to 120 minutes after. So generally speaking, it's best to take it before the meal because you're going to be sort of more of an empty stomach. It'll help to absorb it. Ideally as well, it's recommended in terms of those of you maybe starting levodopa to take maybe some carbohydrate snack like a slice of toast or a whole grain cracker or something, helps to reduce the nausea. And also it's shown that perhaps having a bit of carbohydrate with your tablet helps the absorption of your levodopa. So the main thing is to avoid large protein heavy meals, because basically your tablet's going to get stuck in your stomach. Because if you have a large protein meal, it slows down the digestive of your digestive system. So your tablet is going to stay in your stomach while that food has been digested. And more than likely, it's going to be broken down and you're not going to get anywhere near as much of that tablet into your bloodstream as you would if you had it separate from a large meal. And also avoiding taking your tablets with milk. Often people take tablets with milk, but milk contains protein, just like all dairy foods do as well. So take it with a glass of water. So this just shows you here, these are typical Irish kind of meals. And I know being in Australia there last year, that, it's not dissimilar in terms of some of the portion sizes. So you can see like these huge steaks and huge fry-ups are going to interfere with your levodopa because of the quantity of protein that are in these meals. So helping to smooth out your symptom fluctuations, one of the key things is trying to keep your protein requirement for the day to a maximum of 1 gram per kilogram of your body weight per day. Now, some people might be able to tolerate more than that. It's again trial and error, but we know through research that people who have very high levels of protein in their diet tend to require more levodopa than people of a moderate amount of protein. And that's because you need more levodopa to get over that interaction with protein if you're taking excess amounts. So to help it smooth out your symptom fluctuations, it's advisable to spread your protein requirements across 3 meals. So evenly split your protein between your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you find there's particular times of the day, so middle of the day, you tend to have your big carvery meal in the middle of the day, and you find that you're feeling sleepy in the afternoon, you're fatigued, your function is not as good, it's possibly that protein has interfered with that levodopa. So it might be that you're better off to have that large meal in the evening rather than having it in the middle of the day. Then the other thing is in terms of people who take more than 4 levodopa tablets a day, often find it very hard to time, 30 minutes before and 2 hours after. It becomes a mathematical, equation trying to work it all out. So sometimes it's easier to follow what they call a protein redistribution diet. That's where you push most of your protein towards the end of the day so that you don't have to worry about the interaction with your medication and protein during the daytime as much. This is called the protein redistribution diet. Again, showing to keep the sort of protein levels to a low amount during the day, across your breakfast, lunch, and snacks, and have most of your protein in the evening time or supper time. So you'll see here on this little table on the right-hand side, this shows an average woman is 55 kgs. Her total protein would be 55 grams a day for 1 gram per kilogram. Protein during the daytime would be about 10 to 15, and a protein at mealtime would be a maximum, say 40 grams of protein. So putting that in context underneath, you can see the pictures of the chicken breasts. So you'll see there an 8-ounce cooked chicken breast gives you 40 grams of protein. So it puts in context how much protein people are probably in excess often, rather than actually taking a moderate amount. The other thing is just be mindful, if you do have most of your protein in the evening time, is more likely that you're going to be more off because it have more impact on your levodopa efficacy. And also, as we go through the daytime, our gut actually slows down, and that can interfere. So a lot of people report that they actually are more off as the day goes on. That's often because of a buildup of amino acids in the bloodstreams, which are impacting the levodopa, but also in terms of the gut actually slowing things and your tablets kind of not moving as quickly through the system. So if you find you're more off in the evening, sometimes you might need your neurologist to give you like a rescue dose, something like Madapar dispersible, or there might be other medications you use in Australia that basically you can take to switch you on quickly. So if you need to turn in the bed more, get up and go to the toilet. The other thing to be mindful of is people who have dyskinesia. So dyskinesia is a side effect. It's not a symptom of Parkinson's, it's a side effect of having too much levodopa in the body. So with dyskinesia, what happens is you absorb more levodopa than you kind of need, than your brain needs. It's very common in young onset people, in particular women, have a much higher level of dyskinesia than men because of our body composition. And also, when you lose weight, you actually absorb more levodopa. So, and the more levodopa you absorb, the more dyskinesia you can get for people who suffer from it. So if you actually move all your protein to the evening time and you don't have any protein interfering with your levodopa, it means you're going to absorb more levodopa. So those of you who have dyskinesia, it might actually worsen your dyskinesia. So it's a very individual approach, and you need to trial and error. And sometimes it might be that you would reduce your levodopa, but separate it from your meals, and that is a better combination for you. So it's something that you need to discuss with your Parkinson's nurse or your neurologist. So it's very important, if you're going to look at a protein redistribution diet, ideally to work with a dietitian to help you make out a meal plan based on what your weight is, what your dietary pattern is, what your exercise is like, etc., what your medications you're on, to help make sure that you don't lose any weight following this diet and they maintain your muscle mass. So on that note, do not cut out protein. A lot of people think, oh, because it interferes with my meds, I'll just cut it out completely. That is not something that you should do. And also to make a point that not everybody notices an impact of their protein on levodopa. Often in the early days of Parkinson's, people don't notice fluctuations. They don't notice the impact of their meals on their medication efficacy. So it's an individual thing. You have to see yourself. And the best way to actually check that out is actually to do a little food diary for, say, 3 days and track what your symptoms are like. So if you eat, your medications, you take your medication with your meals, track what your symptoms are like, and then you could track a couple of days when you separate them and see do the symptoms improve. And that'll give you a good indication of whether it's impacting you or not. So don't cut out protein, because protein helps to combat fatigue because it contains iron, good, and B vitamins. It's good for your immune function. It helps you to retain your muscle mass, which is very important for Parkinson's, for us to retain our muscle mass because we don't want to fall. And it actually helps us to make dopamine. So the other thing I wanted to mention just about helping to smooth out symptom fluctuations and get the most out of your levodopa is a thing called gastroparesis, which is slow stomach emptying. So these are the common symptoms of slow stomach emptying. They reckon 60% of people with Parkinson's could have slow stomach emptying. And it's not something that I think is really spoken about enough. But symptoms include heartburn, reflux, nausea, vomiting, particularly at night, feeling full quickly when eating. So once you start eating, you start to fill up very quickly. Abdominal pain or bloating, belching, a loss of appetite and weight loss because of all these symptoms. Changes in blood sugar, because basically the sugary foods stay in your stomach for longer, so it leads to you having higher peaks of blood sugars. So it's very important that if you have any of these symptoms, you get properly assessed, ideally by a gastroenterologist, with the person who would diagnose this, but talk to your neurologist if you're having these symptoms and ask for a referral to get assessed. And ideally to see a dietitian, because there's particular dietary sort of interventions that can help with slow stomach emptying. So from the point of view of your medication efficacy and being on more of the time, is if you slow stomach emptying, as I mentioned, that tablet is going to get stuck in your stomach for too long. And it means some people actually, they get basically their medication doesn't work at all, or they get, very sort of erratic effects out of the medication. And that's because depending on what you eat can affect the emptying of your stomach. The other thing then is in terms of gut bacteria can interfere with your medication absorption. So there's one called H. pylori, which is in your stomach. And people who are diagnosed or get H. pylori infections have a higher risk of developing Parkinson's. And once they have Parkinson's, tend to get reinfections with H. pylori. And again, this is partly to do with slow stomach emptying. So the bacteria is able to sort of proliferate. So the way to test for H. pylori is common symptoms are stomach pain, bloating, gas, and ulcers. But sometimes people don't notice symptoms. And often they can pick it up when they're in hospital from it's quite a common infection in hospitals. So it's tested by using a gastroscope. They put a scope down your mouth into your intestines, or a breath test. And the treatment is called quadruple therapy. Now, there's kind of a mixed review in terms of treatment of H. pylori has shown to benefit Parkinson's symptoms, to improve them, and some studies have shown that it hasn't improved them. And obviously, in terms of some of this therapy includes antibiotics. So really, it's something that you need to discuss with, if you do have this infection, with your neurologist as to whether to go on this treatment or what the best approach is. But from a protective factor point of view, after you've got rid of H. pylori, or to avoid getting it, a fibre-rich diet, adequate B vitamins, a low salt, and we notice in the Australian diet it's very high salt intake, reducing ultra-processed foods, because diets which are high in ultra-processed foods, high salt, low B vitamins, and low vitamin D are linked to this H. pylori infection. The other thing then, in terms of infection, is bacteria, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So the symptoms of this are chronic bloating, abdominal pain or cramps, gas, diarrhea, constipation, weight loss, and nutrient deficiencies. Again, some people may not always notice symptoms, but again, it can be tested for using a breath test, and is commonly treated with an antibiotic. So basically, it's important that to help protect your body from getting SIBO is to reduce your intake of simple sugars, because they basically create fermentation in the bowel, which causes the bloating. Reduce the intake of saturated fats and highly processed foods, so the ultra processed foods that I was mentioning. Again, coming back to this Mediterranean pattern of foods is really important to help reduce this small intestinal bile overgrowth, because basically this small intestinal bile overgrowth is where this unhealthy bacteria is allowed to proliferate. So the Mediterranean diet helps to balance that out and reduce the less healthy bacteria. Having regular gaps between your meals, so 2 to 3 hours between your eating episodes in the day, helps reduce this bacterial overgrowth because it reduces that opportunity to ferment foods. And also there's a diet that dietitians use on a regular basis with people who have irritable bowel syndrome called the low FODMAP diet, which actually helps to reduce fermentation in the bowel. Is something that people could consider, but really should be done under the guidance of a dietitian because it can cut out a lot of healthy foods and it's only a short-term solution. And they can identify which foods are particularly cause you problems in terms of your symptoms. So the next thing I want to focus on is vitamins. The core area here is B vitamin deficiency is a big area. So vitamin B deficiency can lead to brain fog, tiredness, depression, forgetfulness, muscle weakness, falls, and also neuropathies, which are peripheral pins and needles in your hands and feet. So a lot of these symptoms are similar to Parkinson's symptoms. And people often think that their Parkinson's is progressing, but it might be actually that their Parkinson's isn't progressing. It's just their symptoms are worse because of this deficiency. So again, I looked at the Australian intake of vitamin B12. So low serum vitamin B12 is found in almost a quarter of participants. Low folate is another B vitamin. And among those people with very low serum B12 had high homocysteine, which is associated with heart risk, risk of cardiac problems, but also I'll show you it has an impact on Parkinson's too. So in terms of vitamin B and vitamin B6 deficiency, low vitamin B12 is a status is common in early Parkinson's. If you have a low B12 at baseline, it predicts a greater worsening of mobility. And elevated homocysteine levels are associated with greater motor impairment in men and poor cognitive performance in women. Neuropathy, which is this pins and needles, is very common in people with Parkinson's who have over 1,500 milligrams of levodopa a day. So just recently in the USA, the FDA reviewed 14 seizure reports tied to vitamin B6 deficiency in Parkinson's. 2 deaths were linked with very low B6 levels and uncontrolled seizures. And these are seen in people who are over 1,000 milligrams of levodopa a day, appear to carry the greatest risk, reinforcing the need for regular monitoring. So I think this is really important because as the longer you have Parkinson's, often the higher the level of doses you're on. So you need to speak to your clinician about this information. So in terms of other B vitamins, there's some individual research trials, one that showed that thiamine led to significant improvement in motor and non-motor symptoms. A recent 2 cases of people experienced improvement after taking, again, thiamine and vitamin B12 combined. And also there's a niacin, another vitamin B, which has been shown to have positive effects in some research and negative, not positive, well, didn't have an effect on the other research. So I'm not advising that you go and take these supplements, but it's just showing you that there's an awful lot within the B vitamins that we need more research on that I think could potentially have an impact on our symptom control, but also potentially on progression. So we need a lot more in this area. Just a caveat about B vitamins is they're not innocuous. So certain B vitamins, so niacin, pyridoxine is another, the B6 that I mentioned, and the folate in high doses can have negative impacts. So, often you go into health food stores and they'll give you these high dose, B complex. You need to be very careful that you're not overdoing it because it can actually have a negative impact. The likes of thiamine, vitamin B12, are generally don't have an upper limit that there's concern about. But again, like anything, you don't want to be doing excessive amounts. The other thing is vitamin D, very important for us with Parkinson's because people with Parkinson's higher level of osteopenia and osteoporosis. So that's weak bones. And obviously if you fall, that's a very bad outcome for people with Parkinson's. End up in hospital, don't get your medications in time. People with Parkinson's have the longest bed stays of all neurological conditions. And the longer you stay in hospital, the worse your condition gets. So you want to keep out of hospital as much as you can. So in terms of osteoporosis, people often don't notice symptoms, but they notice vitamin D deficiency can appear as fatigue, bone pain, general muscle weakness, muscle aches, muscle cramps, and mood changes like depression. So in terms, again, looking at Australian deficiency, this compares the summer is on the left, is the amount of deficiency, and the winter is on the right. So you can see in the winter time, levels of deficiencies are much higher. And that's because the sun is not at the right angle in the sky to get as much vitamin D, which we make from our skin. So the vitamin D requirements in terms of in Australia is basically for people under 70 to take 10 micrograms of vitamin D a day, people over 70 to take 15 micrograms of vitamin D a day. And I would say that people with Parkinson's should be taking that on a year-round basis. Also, just in terms of the Australian intake of general micronutrients, so the dietary contents of vitamin A, E, C, B9, B12, zinc, calcium, iron, etc., reduced significantly in people who eat too much of the ultra-processed foods. So again, the impact of the high top shelf foods. So from a weight point of view, weight loss you need to watch out for. So things like rigidity and tremor burn calories. Constipation can put people off their diet, so they don't eat as much. Slow stomach emptying can make you lose weight. Difficulty preparing, cooking, or eating food. Lack of smell and taste can cause us to lose weight. This is a colleague of mine, Matt Eagles, in the UK, and he's just showing you here dyskinesia and how difficult it is to actually, the frustration of that is really, substantial. So, sorry, I'm just going to see if I can stop that. So just on the right-hand side as well, just showing you here, the dyskinesia burns a huge amount of weight as well, which can create weight loss. The other thing is to watch out for malnutrition. And again, you can look at this after when the recording is up, but basically it's a self-screening calculator to actually work out whether you're suffering from malnutrition, and it gives you advice, and really you should see a dietitian if you are malnourished. Weight gain can also happen. So in relation to impulse control disorders, in particular in relation to agonist medication, eating disorders, food addiction are quite common in Parkinson's. So if you're eating overnight, secretly eating, do not keep that to yourself. Talk to your clinician about it and get referred to a dietitian who can compassionately help you manage that. Then also weight gain happens after DBS, because obviously if you have a lot of tremor, dyskinesia before DBS, that's resolved, and so you're not burning as much calories, so you end up gaining weight. So people can gain up to 6 kilograms up to a year after, and that can have significant impact if people are a bit overweight to start before their DBS. So just coming to the end here, so a checklist is, keep an eye on your weight, do the malnutrition score, get yourself a DEXA scan, which is actually a scan to test your bone density. Get your vitamin D, vitamin B12, vitamin B6. I should have put folate in there, iron and ferritin checked. Keep an eye on your bowel movements and try to have a bowel movement daily if you can. Fibre and fluid is very important. Check for dyssynergic defecation and gastroparesis symptoms. If you're suffering from either of those, get referral to the appropriate person. Have a check of protein impact on your medication. Do a little food diary to see if it's impacting you, and ask for a referral to a dietitian. So the thing is that the reality is that we know from research, 85% of people don't have access to a dietitian. So you need to ask for it to get it. It's like anything in the health services. You don't ask, you won't get. So request it through your neurology team, through your general practitioner, to your community health centre, through private options. And just to point you in the direction, there is Dietitians Australia, where you can actually find a list of dietitians. Now, there's not very many who are experienced in Parkinson's, but if you bring it to them, you can bring this presentation to them and say, this is what's going on with me. Dietitians will, upskill to help you. But there are a couple of dietitians who are specialists in Parkinson's. There's one lady called Amy, and I can't remember her surname. She has a website called Parkinson's Diet, I think it is, in Australia. And then also, just because of this gap, we have developed online nutrition programs for people with Parkinson's to try and provide nutrition education to meet that gap of knowledge. So again, there's a code there that you can scan, or the website is nutritionpd.com. So that's it. Sorry, I've gone well over. But hopefully I've answered a lot of questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Richelle, for joining us. And thanks everybody for coming into this Let's Talk Parkinson's.